Before the MCU took over the world, there was Blade. Wesley Snipes sliced his way onto the scene in 1998, bringing a dark, edgy superhero flick that redefined the genre. You know the action, the iconic lines, the sunshades. But there's more to Blade than meets the eye. So join along as we dive into the crypt of Blade trivia. We're gonna unearth secrets from the set, surprising connections to other movies, and facts that will make you say, damn, I didn't know that. So grab your garlic cloves and tighten your silver stakes, because we're about to get schooled on the world of Blade. But before we begin, a quick reminder that this video will contain major spoilers, so don't say we didn't warn you. When David Goyer first pitched the idea of doing a Blade movie, the executives of New Line felt there were only 3 actors who could possibly do the role: Wesley Snipes, Denzel Washington, and Lawrence Fishburne. But in Goyer's mind, Snipes was always the perfect choice for the character of Blade, and that's why he wrote the part of Blade with the actor in mind. The scene where Quinn, Donald Logue, attacks Karen in the hospital corridor features lots of screaming, but the people behind the scenes knew something was wrong when Logue started yelling too. During the tussle, Logue fell face first onto the hard floor and completely dislodged his jaw. He had broken it in an accident years prior, and opening his mouth too wide and too fast can unhinge it. They were filming in an abandoned hospital but had to rush to a real one. One of the attendees in the hospital said, "I've got this guy who's dressed as a third-degree burn victim, essentially naked, running in with his jaw hanging down." In that moment, the room cleared out pretty fast. Goyer explained in the DVD commentary that the scene where Karen touches Blade's sword was originally longer as she went on to discover a weird, hybrid infant of some kind floating in a tank. It came with a jump scare, and Goyer says, "I think it would have scared the living shit out of the audience, but New Line felt it was just too horrible." Chris Christopherson's character, Whistler, was created for Blade's cameo on Spider-Man, the animated series, 1994. But he was liked so much by Marvel's CEO that he was adopted into the Marvel Universe. While discussing the character of Deacon Frost, Wesley Snipes described him as the kind of guy who'd ice skate uphill. Stephen Norrington and Goyer loved the phrase so much they worked it into the film, hence producing one of the best lines before finishing off a villain.
"Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill."
Wesley Snipes was interested in doing a movie adaptation of Black Panther when he was offered the project, and said that he was unfamiliar with Blade, but upon seeing more of a connection to the blaxploitation heroes of the 1970s, he said, "I just approached him as this really cool character where I'd get to do martial arts and wear a leather suit." When Karen first meets Whistler, Blade can be seen holding a map of New Orleans. This not only implies the city they are in, it is an homage to the comic books. Many stories in the Blade series occur in New Orleans. Quinn originally had a much smaller role, but Donald Logue was so funny on set that his character was expanded, and he was allowed to ad-lib a good portion of his dialogue. A deleted conversation from the script explained how Blade's sword originally belonged to Whistler, who himself was part of a long line of vampire hunters. Karen was originally going to be played by a white actress, but Wesley Snipes encouraged the filmmakers to cast a black actress, leading to N'Bushi Wright being cast in the role. Mark Wahlberg and Bruce Payne were considered for the role of Deacon Frost, and Jet Li was also offered the part but opted to do Lethal Weapon 4 that was released in 1998 instead. Skeet Ulrich also lobbied hard for the role of Deacon Frost before it was eventually given to Stephen Dorff. The little girl who fought Blade in the library scene was Ebony Adams, who is credited as the martial arts kid. She was a national competitor coming in under Grandmaster Billy Blanks, inventor of Tabo and star of several films such as Balance of Power, 1996, and she had to be tracked down according to Wesley Snipes in the commentary. Their fight in the library was a technique to surprise the audience with an unlikely adversary to Blade. The scene where Karen and Deacon are talking about the cure for vampirism initially ran a bit longer, and answered the question of how the vampires would feed if everybody was turned into a vampire. They would keep some humans alive in giant blood bags to harvest them. The bags can still be seen in a doorway during the scene, and later played an integral part of the plot in Blade Trinity, 2004. It was also the underlying plot structure for the movie Daybreakers, 2009. Stan Lee originally had a cameo that was ultimately cut from the film. He played one of the cops that came into the Blood Club during the aftermath and discover Quinn's body on fire. In the scene where Blade is chased to the subway, and the subway train is passing by, all the passengers are cardboard cutouts with the special FX man among them. In the original Marvel Comics storyline, the character Blade was English, not American. He was once a member of the fictional British intelligence agency MI13, which is the Marvel Universe's super spy agency, a group created to combat superhuman, extraterrestrial, and mystical threats taking place in the United Kingdom. The success of this film, especially since it followed the derided Batman and Robin, 1997, is often considered the beginning of the rise of the superhero genre to become dominant in mainstream film. According to Wesley Snipes and Stephen Dorff on the commentary, Snipes had thoughts on the scene where Blade and Deacon Frost face off during the day on a busy street. The issue with this scene involved scheduling realities and Norrington's uncertainty as to what he wanted. It was one of Dorff's first days, and the guy hadn't had the chance to figure out what his character was, let alone play the dynamics of the scene. Snipes tried to help, and it paid off. He told Dorff, "We need more." And it finally clicked, resulting in a powerful interaction between the two. Stephen Dorff doesn't disagree, but he does add that it was an interesting day in part because people like David Fincher were visiting the set. He had also been rehearsing for hours and felt his performance was growing stale. So when Snipes stopped to watch playback and to remind Dorff that he's a producer and therefore has more say on the film, the two grew antagonistic. The most tense situations on a movie tend to make the best movies. Michael Morbius was to be used as the main antagonist in Blade 2, 2002, but the idea was dropped when Marvel sold the character's rights to Artisan Entertainment to produce a standalone Morbius film. The vampire on the rooftop in the alternate ending is Morbius, played by director Stephen Norrington, and Morbius eventually made his live-action debut in Morbius, 2022. The blobulous vampire Pearl took 4 people to perform, 1 at the head, 1 at each arm, and 1 operating the feet. He's surrounded by used blood bags and debris, but originally they wanted dead children scattered around as well, seeing as Pearl was too big to move around easily and would need easy prey. Stephen Norrington stated that the cause of Pearl's obese size was the creature gaining a cannibalistic lust for infants and children as he loves to eat their hearts. Pearl was so large that a set had to be built around him. It was about 700 pounds of latex skin that had to be moved with a forklift. Additionally, it was Wesley Snipes' idea that the entrance to Pearl's lair be through a walk-in freezer. Pearl was originally designed as an androgynous Japanese man. In updating the vampire lore, Stephen Norrington and David Goyer decided that crosses wouldn't work against vampires, citing, "What if a vampire was Jewish? Why would a cross work against him?" Deacon Frost is reimagined as a more Generation X type of character. His comic book counterpart was an older, German-accented, white-haired gentleman that hailed from 1868. Blade himself is also younger, having been born in 1967 instead of 1929. UCLA linguistics professor Victoria Fromkin was hired to design a vampire language after Victoria was the creator of the Paku's language from the TV series Land of the Lost, 1974. Despite the fact that vampire's language was finally used for 2 scenes, one of which was when a vampire elder berates Frost, and another when Pearl yells about the blood god in a foreign line, that later Blade repeats to Frost during their meeting in the city park. Although it sounds like Slavic or Hungarian to hint its Eastern European origins as a reference for Transylvania, Victoria intermixed vaguely Russian and Czech words to create the vampire's language. Wesley Snipes was a fan of Hong Kong martial arts films and wanted the film to have that kind of action. Stephen Dorff, on the other hand, wasn't a fan of commercial movies, in particularly comic book movies, but Stephen Norrington convinced him to take the role of Deacon Frost. Stephen Dorff modeled Frost's character on several other villains, especially Jack Nicholson's Joker in Batman, 1989. When Blade is first engaging Frost, he is seen charging up the ramp with his ninjato out and away from him. This is the correct way to run with any sharp instruments to prevent accidental death by impalement if said instruments are dropped while running. David Goyer and Stephen Norrington had some battles with New Line Cinema over Karen's relationship with Curtis. The filmmakers wanted to keep the conversation going a little too long, to the point that viewers are bored with these two talking about themselves. And that's when the vampire rises. The studio kept requesting they trim it all down, as it sounds like Melrose Place. Hence, Stephen Norrington and Goyer called the scene between Karen and Curtis the Melrose Place 1992 segment, placing a dull romantic segment in to lull the audience into a false sense of security. The studio wanted to cut the scene, but the creators fought for it. It got one of the strongest reactions at a test screening, and it stayed in. Stephen Norrington wanted Chris Christopherson for the role, as he was the cool grandfather, grungy type of fighting, jolly type of a guy. David Goyer actually wrote the character, though with Samuel Fuller in mind. But Patrick McGoohan was the first choice to play Whistler, as Stephen Norrington was a fan of The Prisoner that was released in 1967. If you've enjoyed this video and would like to see more fun facts about your favorite movies and series, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, as we will be releasing a second part of this trivia extravaganza where we will unearth even more interesting aspects from behind the scenes that you will surely enjoy learning about. So until we see you all in the next video, have a great day and peace out.